Hello, everyone. My name is Nathan Kolb, and it is my pleasure, as always, to welcome you to today's Credit Safe webinar. We've taken a couple of weeks off, and it is our pleasure to be back with you today and through the next several weeks. This week, talking specifically about business bankruptcy and the different things surrounding it. It's a hot topic right now, something that a lot of people are talking about, and we wanted to weigh in and talk through this a little bit. So today, as I already said, we're going to be talking about the domino effect of business bankruptcy, and we're going to discuss a little bit more what we mean by that, those topics and that terminology and everything as we get into this. But I get to welcome back a very familiar face to anyone who has been to any of these webinars before, in Mark Edwards, who is the managing director of Credit Safe USA. He is a registered global credit professional with a history in business information. He's years experience in portfolio management, credit and risk solution, business development. He's kind of a head honcho around these parts of Credit Safe. And he's a new homeowner too. So if he's a little stressed, a little tired looking, that's why, because he's been moving in and doing all that type of stuff. But Mark, as always, it's great to see you. It's great to have you on, and I'm looking forward to talking to you today.
Thank you, Nathan.
So, today, folks, we're talking about, bankruptcy and coming out of 2020 and into 2021 and now about halfway through 2021 and the pandemic and all the different things that have been going on with COVID and everything. This has been kind of a topic that has been in the air, so to speak, in business and enterprise a lot. This idea of bankruptcy and business closures and all these type of things. And just to give you an idea, there are some really big companies that have declared bankruptcy in the past, 12 to 18 months, whether or not it was due to the pandemic or just accelerated by the pandemic. There's a lot of these companies, companies like Papyrus, Brooks Brothers, Pier 1 Imports, Guitar Center, Neiman Marcus, GNC, JCPenney, Lucky Brand, California Pizza, Lord & Taylor, Century 21, Ruby Tuesdays, Francesca's, and on and on and on. We're seeing this across the country of these large, big, established brands having to go through bankruptcy. And so the way we wanted to start today, and I would really be interested to know, is for you folks that are here listening with us and you're in the audience today, how many of you have been affected? How many of your businesses have been affected by bankruptcy? By other businesses or your business going bankrupt, whether it's the ones that I just mentioned or it's another one. So again, just drop it in the comments there, in the Q&A. Let us know, yeah, hey, we've been affected, 3 times, 1 time, never. If you want to tell us what company went bankrupt that affected you, we'd love to know. And it just helps us inform the discussion and kind of know who's going on or who's around with us while we're in there. But if you wouldn't mind answering that for me again, how many of you or how have you been affected by business bankruptcy in your own company? So I'm kind of stealing a little bit of the thunder from Mark, which I hate to do, but I did want to kind of start us off with that and have a really good kind of setup going on. And we've got some answers coming in. A couple of people are saying smaller businesses or medium-sized businesses. Somebody says a small mom and pop shop here that, we're having serious issues really quickly due to the pandemic and everything like that. So definitely we see that. But Mark, as these come in, I'll give you more of the answers and everything, so you don't have to worry about looking at those. But folks, keep writing those answers in. Let us know. And Mark, I want to give you as much time as possible to talk about this idea of this business bankruptcy and the bankruptcy domino effect. So I'm going to let you kind of take over at this point and start going as these come in, and I'll break in and let you know some of the other answers.
I don't know if you saw my smirk a minute ago, Nathan. I was very impressed with the way you reeled off those companies. It was like you memorized them.
Almost like I memorized them and prepped for this.
Appreciate everyone's time today. My objective really is to start the conversation around what is bankruptcy, what is the common terminology. We're going to dive into what we call the domino effect. Before we dive in, I just want to make everyone aware that bankruptcy is a legal proceeding. This webinar is not meant to replace competent legal counsel. And if you have specific questions, I would recommend speaking to legal counsel. Business bankruptcy, or all bankruptcy, is complex and obviously very serious, but it doesn't always mean the end of the road. There are many businesses out there that have become bankrupt, survived, and even gone on to flourish. Bankruptcy is a federal legal procedure for dealing with debt problems for both individuals and businesses. Specifically, it's a case filed under one of the chapters of Title 11 of the United States Code. This is also known as the Bankruptcy Code. The fundamental goal of bankruptcy is to give a financial fresh start from burdensome debts. I'm having a little technical issue here, Nathan, bear with me. Yeah. You may hear the term.
Yep.
Sorry,
go ahead.
You may also hear the term bankruptcy relief filing. How bankruptcy relief filing can help the debtor, whether it's a person or business, make a plan to repay their debts. Bankruptcy cases normally begin when a debtor files a petition of bankruptcy to the bankruptcy court, either by an individual, spouses together, a corporation, or any other entity. All bankruptcies are handled in federal courts, and there are several types of bankruptcies. These are usually referred to as their chapters. Now, in general, there are several common factors. Chapter 12, which is applicable to farmers, and that's one we're not really going to touch today. Chapter 9 allows for municipalities to file for bankruptcy protection and resolve their debts. Chapter 13, the reorganization of a company so it can remain doing business with a court's mandated plan. Chapter 11 allows international companies to gain access to the US bankruptcy courts. But in most cases, you're going to hear about Chapter 7 and Chapter 11, particularly for business-related bankruptcies. Chapter 7 simply liquidates the company's assets, while Chapter 11 allows a business to continue under a reorganization plan. Under Chapter 7, this is the end of the road. The companies will stop all those operations and completely go out of business. Firms in the Chapter 7 are past the stage of reorganization. They must sell off any non-exempt assets to creditors. A trustee is then appointed to liquidate or sell the assets. That money is used to pay off his debts. Creditors to a debtor are typically divided into two. You have secured creditors who are prioritized, and then unsecured creditors who are not prioritized. Our research shows that secured creditors typically receive about 77 cents on the dollar, whereas a non-secured would receive 2 cents on the dollar. There are huge disparity in these figures, and these are just averages, but typically goes to show the difference between being a secured creditor and an unsecured creditor. In Chapter 11, the company doesn't go out of business, but is given the opportunity to reorganize his debts, come through arrangements with his debtors in the hope it can re-emerge as a healthy organization. In 2020, there were just under 7,000 Chapter 11 filings, and it was the last year officially since 2009, the worst year officially since 2009. Another chapter you may hear of is Chapter 22. This isn't necessarily a proper legal term, but it's a nickname for a company that files for Chapter 11 twice. I'm just going to skip ahead.
Yeah, I do want to say, Mark, just for folks, Mark went through those really quick, and he did have a great job kind of explaining those. We do have some videos that we created as a company that are posted on our LinkedIn page that you can see, and they kind of explain that, gives you kind of a visual representation of each of these and everything like that. So we'll make sure we link to those, but just in case you were looking for those or want a kind of a refresh on any of that, you can find that on the Credit Safe LinkedIn page.
One of the questions or topics, Nathan, you asked me to prepare was, how do you avoid dealing with businesses in bankruptcy? And it's nearly inevitable. Whether you're selling or buying business to business, you're going to encounter a bankruptcy of a customer, supplier, or any other business relationship, competitor, partner. To avoid the inevitable disruption that could cause your business, we use information from companies like Credit Safe to anticipate such an event in the future. So when looking to predict a bankruptcy or reduce the effect of being negatively impacted by a bankruptcy, the level of data that's available to aid your decision is largely determined by the size and the prominence of that company. So, for example, a large public company, the information is going to be far more readily available than a small SME or micro entity. Nonetheless, good credit management is key here. So, assuming good due diligence was done at the point of account origination, what we're really talking about here is monitoring that account to track some of the following changes. So a couple of things I would be on the lookout for using monitoring and other tools is changes in the payment speed and frequency to your business. If typically you're being paid 15 days beyond terms, then that's slowly getting slower. You may want to question, the financial health of that business. You might also experience difficulties in being able to reach that business where they were far more easier to reach before payments were slowing down. There may be frequent changes to key personnel. So let's say the management has changed. That could be an indicator. We're also looking for changes in the company credit scores and ratings of the companies being downgraded. So there are other events that could drive the credit score to drop down. The other thing is if there are file financials, you can monitor the changes for file financials. The number one indicator within the credit safe data is the changes in the payment speed. So you'll notice that the days beyond terms are slowly increasing, or in some cases quickly increasing. We touched upon, Nathan, prior to this, what is the domino effect and why is it important to businesses to be aware of this? The number one cause for business failure in the United States is cash flow, and that is typically caused by late payments from customers or non-payment from customers. And it's easy to see how bankruptcy adds to that. When I've been in sales for 16 years now, and one of the common objections me and my team come across when speaking to customers is, we don't think we need your services. We only deal with blue chip companies, and blue chip companies are not impacted by bankruptcy. 2020, I think there were just under 600 public company filings for bankruptcy. So there are huge companies that also file bankruptcy, and you alluded to some of those names earlier on. The domino or ripple effect is not an official term. It's rather a phenomenon where we see a significant bankruptcy of an organization that will cause disruption through local regions or even industries. And there's two examples that I find very interesting, and I'll just talk you through these. The first one was a Korean shipping company by the name of Hanjin that filed for bankruptcy in 2016. You may recall this. It was all over the news at the time. At the time, it was the largest shipping company in the world. At the time of bankruptcy, they had 96 ships stranded at sea with total cargo of about $14 billion. When the debts of the companies were reviewed, it was estimated to be about $10 billion that are owed to its creditors. So we have a situation where there was a massive number of companies whose supplies have never reached their destination, and therefore we're never going to get paid. The timing of this was actually quite significant because it was around August. A lot of companies were ramping up their supplies in anticipation for Thanksgiving and Christmas. As I said, these goods never actually reached their destination. Companies like Nike were impacted, but the biggest burden was obviously to smaller companies. The second interesting example is the city of Detroit. So not a business bankruptcy, rather than a municipal bankruptcy. Detroit filed for bankruptcy in 2013. At the time, it was the largest municipal bankruptcy in the US. They had over 100,000 creditors. So if you think about that, that's over 100,000 people, companies and other organizations that were owed money from the city of Detroit. The interesting thing in this example is we're all aware of Detroit's fortunes being closely linked with the automobile industry. The bankruptcy of Detroit was preceded by Chrysler and General Motors, both in 2009 also. Both have since emerged, but I think it's a good example of how those the domino effect on these. You asked me, Nathan, to prepare some tips on how to deal with companies in bankruptcy. I know we were meant to address a question there, but I sort of jumped in.
That's okay.
When dealing with a customer that enters bankruptcy, CreditSafe has released a video that's available on our LinkedIn profile. The first thing you should do is stop all non-bankruptcy related communication. Once bankruptcy has been officially filed and you receive notification, the debtor is protected from collections outside of the court proceedings. So cease collection efforts immediately. Then once you've done that, you should shift your energies towards the next 4 items that we're going to talk about. You should review the notice of bankruptcy that you're going to receive from the person that's handling the bankruptcy. You want to ensure that the elements of your owed debt are correct. So the amount, the type, the dates. Make sure you've got all of the documentation. Make sure you understand the chapter of bankruptcy that they're filing with. Make sure you take note of the schedule and how much time you have for each element of the proceedings, and contact the appropriate persons based on the documentation that's been provided to you. You then want to review the return on investment of making a claim. Bankruptcy can be long and involve processes and take a significant amount of time and effort and funds. Resolution and repayment are not guaranteed. I mentioned earlier that unsecured creditors typically receive 2 cents on the dollar. So you need to really decide whether proceeding any further is worth the cost. Assuming that you do want to pursue this, you're going to need to prepare a proof of claim. So this will, all of this will be included in the notice of bankruptcy that you'll set. It's required for chapters 7, 13, and probably 11. And it's best practice to fill it out completely with all of the information you have available. The last thing you want to do is attend the meeting of creditors, also known as the 341 meeting. During this meeting, debtors will answer questions under oath pertaining to the information about the bankruptcy and the ability to discharge or satisfy the debt. This allows for significant information to be obtained by his creditors about the overall nature and scope of the bankruptcy and whether that company is likely to emerge and continue trading going forward. So that's the 5 tips I have for you, Nathan.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, we do have a video that covers these as well on our LinkedIn page that we will link to for folks. We'll put a link in on the landing page where this recording will be that will allow them to see this again and kind of walk through these 5 tips that we give to help deal with this. So Mark, we've got some answers from folks from the earlier question. A lot of folks are saying that, they were, or the folks that are answering here are saying they have been affected. Several of them have been affected by the companies we talked about already. Other folks are saying other stores, Sears and other retailers, especially in recent years have been hit hard due to the pandemic and other things. And a lot of small businesses that are getting affected. And it brings to mind a couple of questions here. First of them being, we're talking what you just talked about and things about that first level of bankruptcy. So my customer went bankrupt or my supplier went bankrupt. But you mentioned like engine shipping and things like that. What if their supplies are going to my customer and my customer didn't go bankrupt, but they're being affected? Is there something that I can do as a company that can help prevent even that? Should I be checking on my customers' suppliers and my customers, so to speak, and that type of stuff? Or, what can I do to help prevent that?
It's fairly difficult information to get, and assuming that your customer or your supplier is prepared to give you that information. If the company is public, they typically file a list of their largest clients and the percentage of the business that they represent. But smaller companies who are private by definition, and therefore it's going to be difficult to get that information. I do recommend monitoring the media. So, if company A is in partnership with company B, you can monitor for things like that. But it's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So it just makes it a tough thing to do. And what I know you've talked about this before, but I want folks to be able to hear this too. What role does having a solid professional relationship with your customers, with your suppliers, play in all of this in the lead up? I mean, obviously, once they're in the bankruptcy proceedings, that's legal, and there's guidelines to that. But leading up to it, like you were saying, suddenly we see a trend towards later payments or issues with delivery or something like that. How important is that relationship when it comes to those type of things?
I think all things credit can be improved with good communication. Having good communication with your customers, having good communication with your suppliers is key. If you're in the unfortunate position where you are the person that could be going bankrupt, it's a good thing to do to let your creditors know you're experiencing issues. They could even provide assistance or help in certain ways that could alleviate that issue. But good communication is key, and having a good direct relationship is the winner today.
Perfect. And you were talking about those 5 tips that we have for if one of your customers or a company you're partnered with goes into bankruptcy. But what are some of those things, the tips that you can do with those things that like we were just talking about, they are starting to pay late. They are starting to, you're starting to see some trends. You're starting to see some concerns. Maybe the score is going down, or there's some red flags, but they're not there yet. What are some things that the companies can do to help themselves in that type of situation?
Yeah, the first thing is communication. So speak to your customer, explain the situation you're in, explain the trends that you're seeing. Is there a legitimate reason for this? If there's a breakdown in communication, that can add to the further flags, and you would then probably consider reducing the credit line until you're more confident. In some instances, the credit line has been exceeded. At that point, you may want to just halt all future credit until you receive payment.
Right. Makes total sense. And a question here too. We're talking bankruptcies, which is a true legal setup, and there's the whole, like you said, there's the chapters and all that type of stuff. But what's the difference really in all reality between that and just, well, I shut my doors, I'm not doing business anymore?
It's a great question. So the best way to describe this is one is visible and one is invisible. So when a bankruptcy is filed, there's data available to help us identify this. When a company just shuts its doors without being informed, we really have no visibility of this. So we're keeping an eye on various pulses of data to make sure that company keeps trading. But sometimes it's just impossible to do that. When a company is formed, they are liable for all debts, or the owner is liable for all the debts. If a company closes its doors and it owes you a sum of money, it's best to engage with a collections professional who will assist you in collecting that debt.
Okay.
The distinct definition between them is, bankruptcy is a legal proceeding, and closing doors is we're just not doing business anymore.
Okay. And is there anything different to look for as companies are trying to, hedge themselves against that and prevent having any issues based on a closure versus a declaration of bankruptcy? Is there any difference that they should be looking for, or is it a similar type of things, data points that they should be paying attention to?
When a company closes its doors, it should really make sure that all of its debts are paid off. And we hear a lot of stories where companies make sure their debts are closed off and then close the business. If there are no debts, there's no reason that a company can't close its doors. It could be a retirement. There are lots of good companies that close their doors with all of their debts paid off. It's only an issue if there's debts outstanding and you haven't been paid, which is the company is still liable for.
Okay. And they should just be looking, in case something's going bad with the company, again, delayed payments.
The red flags are the same.
Okay.
With bankruptcy, it's probably actually a good thing because at least there's an official process. If a and again, I don't want to sort of give too much legal advice here, but
Sure.
if the company closes its doors, the creditors can get together to push them into bankruptcy also.
Okay. That's great to know. And again, folks, we have an understanding of what's going on here. Mark is a professional here, but we are not legal professionals. We are not lawyers, so this isn't legal advice. This is just good, solid business advice as best we know how to give. So, Mark, it looks like we've covered all the questions here, and I appreciate that. Any last minute things that or last things here that you want to just pass on to folks as we've been dealing with this, as we see all these companies that are declaring bankruptcy, and we know business closures have been happening and things like that. Anything that they should be paying attention to, or things that they should be working towards over the next little while?
My advice is just do good due diligence, investigate the company. Any company that is looking for a credit line above your agreed or outside of your agreed tolerances, make sure you get leadership buy-in, and then monitor those companies. As much information as you can get about those is important. There are services such as CreditSafe and other companies that do this. But as well as the credit information, make sure you're monitoring the news. There's things like Google alerts that you can add as well.
Absolutely. Great stuff. And we're going to be looking at, this whole week, we're talking about bankruptcy. Like we said, we've got videos that are on our LinkedIn. We've got this webinar, and then we've got another one coming up, folks, on Thursday that is going to talk about the trends that we're seeing based on our data in both business closures and business bankruptcies. So if you're interested in this topic, if you want to know more about it, you can always go to creditsafe.com/webinars and register for any of our webinars. They're always free. They're always available to you. And we just want to be able to build this community of credit and financial professionals, and that we can have these discussions and talk about these relevant topics as best we know how. So I want to thank you guys for being with us today. Thank you, Mark, for being here and being our speaker today. It's always great to have you. And like I said, we've got another webinar coming up on Thursday, and then several others planned that are coming up, and we're planned all the way through third quarter, and already looking at fourth quarter. So if there's something you want to see, if there's a topic you want to talk about, or if there's a speaker we should have on, please go ahead and send me an email, reach out to me, and I will happily work on getting that together for you, because we do want to make this a place that you want to come to and you can learn from and grow, and we can have a good community atmosphere here. But thank you all so much. Mark, thank you. And everybody have a great rest of the day. We'll see you next time.